All right, sports entertainment marketing class. Very excited to launch the video game marketing unit of our class. Video games definitely a dear place in my heart as I grew up on Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man and Centipede and Tech Mobile and all of those games growing up. Love video games. And the first thing we're going to really kind of look at is going to be some video game culture and some different parts of how the gaming industry has been set up and how it has marketed.
What do we mean by culture for video games?
So I think we could take this in a couple of ways. I think the main way that we're probably going to be talking about this, though, would be the attitudes and moods of players that develop a certain, for lack of a better word, culture within the realm of players themselves. Looking at like your example of image right here, right now, it looks like it's some sort of LAN party where everyone's getting together. I think that video games have been around long enough now where there are certain attitudes and even stigmas against and for video games, depending on what you're playing. If you're talking about, like competitive games, the culture of Super Smash Brothers, which has been around since the 90s, compared to the culture of Fortnite, is very, very different. And I think that, we were even talking about video games as art. I think the people who have these games that have been around longer would probably argue for their video game a little bit more passionately, while these video games that have been around shorter might have greater player fall off, kind of like what you're talking about with your kids and whatnot. Yeah. So to talk about video game culture is not just to talk about all culture of all video games, but to understand that within each genre, within each niche of video games, there is a certain culture of players and a type of person and a type of people who will flock to that game more often than not.
One of the key things we want to look at here is going to be demographics. Finding finding video games that meet the demographics that they have. So statistical data relating to the population and particular groups within it. And we'll be watching a video here in just a second about how video game companies are marketing to women, but every single type of demographic gets to some degree marketed to. They try to find their target market within that. I personally, at my age, am not playing a lot of console games. Mostly I'm playing games that are on my phone. A lot of my friends are the same way. But you all may be playing more console games or playing more games on your PC or wherever. And so all of these demographics are going to fit into that when they are trying to figure out who are we going after. But the marketing unit today will be looking at gender first.
So I was going through some of our analytics here on the channel, and I noticed that around 95% of our audience is male. So then I had a very evil corporate moment. How do we appeal more to women so we have a larger audience with more diversity? Pretty much every game company, movie studio, and TV network ask themselves the same question, and they all deal with it in pretty terrible ways. Like, for example, in Metal Gear Solid 2, they added Pretty Boy Raiden to appeal to female gamers. He ended up being the most hated character in the game. Another tragic example is Pac-Man. Now, this was a popular mod, so I don't know if you could throw the blame for this on Namco, but it is a pretty bad representation of women. It's not enough to just throw in a female character or a good-looking dude. Mass Effect gave you the ability to play as Fem Shep or Female Shepherd, but only 18% of players actually did play as Fem Shep, and only 14% of players were female. I would chalk that up as poor marketing. People didn't know that you could change the gender of the main character. I refuse to believe that the new Tomb Raider draws female players just because the main character is a woman. The split between male and female players seems to be about 70-30, which is the average for core games. I'm assuming that overall 70-30 split is only for console and PC games, excluding mobile games like Candy Crush and social games like Farmville. I've found a ton of articles that claim that there are more female gamers than male gamers, and this just is not true. The real split I found is just under 50%, hovering around 45 to 47% the past few years. But I mean, 47% is still pretty good. Again, this is because a lot of women play mobile puzzle games or simulation games, but here on the Wolf Den, we don't care about that. I tried to find out what core games have a pretty decent ratio between male and female players, but what I kept coming up with were articles that were like, games for girls, and guess what those were? Bejeweled, The Sims, Cake Shop, Roller Coaster Tycoon. While those are all games that women play, those are not at all what I'm looking for. I'm looking for games like Final Fantasy. I feel like that appeals towards women because of the strong female representation and the RPG gameplay, but only 35% of players are female. So very slightly above average. It's clear to me that women aren't drawn to play a testosterone fueled game like Call of Duty, and the data shows that. They are, however, driven to a game like World of Warcraft, because everybody is. So naturally, about 40% of WoW players are female. You could probably chalk that up to that everybody's represented the same, you can create your own character, and the combat is whimsical. Nothing can turn a woman off more than being forced to play in armor like this. Now, I'm not saying it's bad that that's in the game, I'm saying that it's bad that that's the only thing in the game. I found that 56% of Animal Crossing players are female, but I don't think that's much of a surprise. Let's be real here, that's a pretty girly game. 51% of Professor Layton players are female, probably because it's a puzzle game. 39% of Pokemon players are female. I'd like to think it's because of the turn-based combat. There might be some sort of correlation between women and anime games, or maybe women are more drawn towards Nintendo platforms. Nintendo claims that its Super Mario games are an even split between male and female gamers, which I have to assume is complete horse. Every company would love to say that its demo is an even split. Nothing is ever an even split. Hell, even Earth's population is 51% female. Nintendo's split could be close, but I don't know if it's exact. Most shocking to me is that 53% of Just Dance players are female. Wouldn't you think that would be higher? So what I've gathered from this, and this is by no means scientific, is that puzzle games, turn-based games, and to some extent RPGs appeal most to women. Not more to women than men, but they appeal more than the other types of games. It's not enough to just represent women in a politically correct way. You have to appeal to them. I think the best thing to do is to just ignore all of this and make a good game. How about that?
Like you said, I surround myself with people who love games for game's sake. I view true video game culture as very collaborative, as very inclusive. You know, to an extent, people who grew up playing video games, they know what it's like for your parents to not take it super seriously, or for someone to roll your eyes at you, or ask, when are you going to stop playing those games, when are you going to grow up,
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff stays with you. And that stuff didn't feel good growing up. And so I think most people who consider themselves gamers remember that and can share those experiences. And so we don't want other people to feel like that. We want to show you, no, come, let me show you this game, let me show you that game. There's literally something for everybody, because we know the value, we know how awesome it is as an art form. And I think gamer culture is really people who view video games as that art form that is equal in appreciation to cinema, to television, to books, to music, whatever. And in general, I think video game culture is for people who view video games as the culmination of all of those things. I think video games are my favorite form of art because it is every art. It is drawing, it's animation, it's cinematography, it's direction, it's drawing, music. It's all of that kind of formed into one thing, and that's what makes it so special, and why I think it's growing so quickly in popularity, is more and more people are seeing that too.
Another thing that marketing typically does is it segments. So this market segmentation is the practice of dividing your target market into approachable groups. Market segmentation creates a subset of market based on demographics, needs, priorities, common interests, and other psychographic or behavioral criteria used to better understand the target audience. So, when we look at, for instance, like demographic there, as the slide before was talking about age, income, occupation, family size. I have never been a person who plays video games that are like horror based, where they're incredibly violent slasher type games, but I know that some friends of mine do. And so for me, it would be very difficult for me to play that game in my house with little kids running around. Also from a psychographic perspective, there are certain things I'm rather interested in instead of horror type games. Like I would just rather play Retro Bowl on my phone, or I'd rather play things that are just a little more positive in nature. I mean, we do have let our kids play some first-person shooter games and those kinds of things, but that just is it appeals more to my kids now. So the behavioral side of the market segmentation, my purchasing habits have definitely changed over the years, and just kind of what I am willing to spend money on. Most of the games I play are free, and so where Retro Bowl has been really interesting is to be able to get me to pay $5 for coaches credits that allow me to move the game faster along or whatever, which I'm happy to do. I think $5 is a reasonable investment because I love that game so much. But then again, on the geographic side here, we're looking at what area of the country are we in. There's different segments where not only our country but around the world, what are people playing in China, or what are people playing in India, what are people playing in Argentina. Video games are really becoming a massive force. We're going to look during this unit at how it's approaching levels near the NFL, which is really pretty incredible.
Esports is catching it. Are you in the predictor mode where you would say, hey, in 10 years, esports is going to eclipse the NFL?
In the next 10 years, I do think it's possible. I think it's probably inevitable that it'll happen eventually. Although, to the NFL's credit, the NFL is by far the most aggressive, we'll just say traditional sports league in terms of really globalization. I feel like, granted, you have the NBA, which is pretty global, but I feel like the NFL is just such a magnet for attention and creating good storylines and stuff like that. The NFL is going to keep growing over the next 10 years too. But the difference, in my opinion, and this is almost makes it unfair to the NFL and NBA to even compare to esports, because the NFL and NBA are mostly American. Sure, they have global reach, sure, they have fans around the world, but I don't think it's a stretch to say that those sports are mostly American. Most of their attention and popularity comes from the States. Esports, I would say a small fraction, or at least an equal-ish fraction of the popularity of esports comes specifically from America, just a small chunk, whereas the rest of it is Korea, is China, is Japan, is India, all these other places. So I think just by sheer volume of numbers, I do think esports as a whole will ultimately pass the NFL. But like I said, I don't even think that's necessarily a fair comparison to the NFL. The fact that the NFL is going to be so close in 30 years to esports, I think is honestly going to be more impressive in retrospect when we get to that time.
Hi, my name is Freddy Kuguru, and this is What is the Target Demographic for Video Games? Video games have always been designed with the youth in mind. However, these days, the age group that is targeted is getting younger and younger. At a recent Electronic Entertainment Expo, or E3, video game manufacturers made no secret that they are in fact targeting younger and younger kids. Experts say that this is a trend that's been developing for years. However, recently the hardware technology has made this possible. This means that the video game manufacturers have taken away the controllers, so there's no buttons or complicated sequences to learn. Rather, intuitive motions control the gameplay. This eliminates the barriers to entry and allows younger and younger kids to enter the gameplay arena. At the end of the day, however, even though video game manufacturers are targeting younger and younger kids, the age group that takes part in the most video game play is still the age group between 18 to 35 years.
Absolutely have to acknowledge that the virtual realm is absolutely a place. Is it the place? I don't know. But for so many people, it did become that within the past 365, because what other options did you have? Sure, the world started opening back up relatively recently, and it's still going on that route, but we're still going to have a lot of people who are just more comfortable there. And that kind of goes for a couple of different reasons. Of course, health in the pandemic is relative to that, but even what you were just talking about with like video game culture, I mean, how bad does that feel to say, oh, if you play that video game, you don't have friends, you don't hang out with people? That stings. And I was that geeky kid who went to anime and comic conventions and all of that jazz, and there is a certain safety in the online realm that you can acquire when someone's not in your face making fun of what you're doing just because you love to do it. So I think that there absolutely is a place. I think that it is something that can be helpful for those people who are a little more introverted and having trouble getting out there.
With basically how to find who wants to buy your game, how to find your target audience for your game so that all the marketing that you do is directed to the right people. So I put together 5 steps for you to do in order to figure out who your market is. The first thing is identify the genre of your game.
Why do video games have so many genres?
Why do movies? Why do books? Why does anything? I would argue that so many genres exist because video games have become a more popular method of consuming media. And since more people are playing those video games, we've diversified the pool of games that exist out there. So, we have games that exist now that I think, honestly, my grandmother would have loved. Games that aren't necessarily so focused on kill the bad guy or get across the level, but games that really just ask you to interact with something and tell a story while you're experiencing it. I think that games exist nowadays in a very, very broad spectrum, and I can't see them going back to a, simple arcade cabinet and that's all that we get. You're going to have a whole lot more, and I'm expecting even newer genres to appear on the scene as the medium continues to develop.
So step 2 is find related games. Probably something you've done already, but I'm going to elaborate it a bit more based on the 3 things that you listed before. So I think for each aspect of your genre, you should find up to 3 games that are similar. For an example, my game is a 2D side-scroller platformer with hand-painted art, kind of a fantasy and feel-good setting for the story. Similar games to the game dynamics would be things like Ori and the Blind Forest or Donkey Kong Country, like a standard side-scroller platformer. Similar games to the story would be, I think Flower is very similar. And then so similar art is Braid, for example. Very similar art to the art that I'm doing in my game. So list as many games as you can that are related to all the different aspects of your genre. Third step is to find sister genres that are outside of gaming that relate to your genre. Try to think of movies and books and even like tabletop games or animes or even just like art styles or music.
It's everywhere.
Fortnite is amazing.
Fortnite is weird.
Fun. It's epic.
It's everyone.
Everyone else is playing it.
My friend got me into it.
My friends play it. I'm able to hang out with them.
This is CradleCon, a comic book pop culture convention on Long Island. We come here to catch up with the phenomenon of Fortnite. So, what is the game that's seemingly taking over an entire industry?
Fortnite is a free-to-play third-person shooter game that is platform agnostic. It's playable on PC, console, and mobile.
Jos van Dronen has studied video games for
18 years.
He also plays video games.
2 hours a day.
And he has a PhD on the topic.
Fortnite has over 100 million users worldwide. And it makes, according to our data, about $300 million a month. It's a game that has a broad appeal. Video games historically have been on the fringes of the entertainment industry, and they would have sort of violent content, a lot of shooter games, explosions, sort of grunting men, taking each other on. Appeal to a very homogenous, sort of uniformly defined category of audience. If you look at Fortnite, it's very colorful, it's sort of tongue-in-cheek, it's very cartoony. The kind of violence that it has, it's very sort of friendly. People are now playing that never thought of themselves as having any kind of interest in it, and that's what's changing.
Meet the Oak Brothers.
As brothers and our age differences, we don't really have a lot of common activities that we can do together. Games is the closest thing that we can bond over.
My favorite moment playing with my brothers really is just having a screaming match at each other, but we're all laughing at the same time because we all just love having those type of moments with each other.
Usually the games that I play require just shooting and moving around, but this game, Fortnite, required to shoot, move, and build.
There was a skill aspect to it. There was a cooperative element to it, which was great, all put into one.
Fortnite released its free-to-play Battle Royale mode in September 2017. It pits up to 100 players against one another in a frenzied fight for survival. Last one standing wins. Access on major platforms allows Fortnite to reach players far and beyond.
It connects to many, many people around the world. You can buy these dance emotes that basically are trending nowadays.
Emote is an add-on feature. It makes the game's characters dance. But how is a free-to-play game making over $300 million a month?
Fortnite makes money by selling microtransactions, and it sort of opens up the ability for players to communicate, to share.
He says Fortnite is the fastest growing free-to-play video game right now.
Free-to-play and digitally distributed games offer a radically different model in terms of production, development, and distribution.
I play about 5 to 6 hours a day.
The Oak brothers like to watch pros playing Fortnite on Twitch, a video game streaming platform. Streaming on Twitch and YouTube has become very popular. Professional gamers can attract millions of followers. One of them is Ninja. He live streams himself playing Fortnite on Twitch and YouTube every day, and he allegedly earns more than $500,000 every month.
I think Fortnite is here to stay as long as the developers listen to the community.
The games industry today is worth $110 billion, which makes it an order of magnitude larger than music and film, television in many of the main markets. What used to be a fringe form of entertainment is now something so large and so mainstream that really coming to a realization of, hey, maybe there's something here. Maybe this is what audiences want.